My guest today is Khari Thompson, my former high school classmate. Khari has built a career in broadcasting, working his way into NPR in Boston, and now is the policy and editorial producer for the nonprofit Embrace Boston. Khari interviews me on life in Minnesota under the occupation and why I started speaking out on social media. We discuss parenting in Minnesota for myself and then in Boston as a parent of color for Khari. We also talk about growing up in Northwest Indiana and high school at Andrean. We conclude with tips for communities outside of Minnesota on how to prepare for the inevitable ICE invasion. This is Occupation Breakdown.
Thanks for hopping on with me. It's first of all, when did you move out to Minnesota? You've been out there for a little bit, right?
I'm just over a decade now. I think it was Thanksgiving 2015. I ended up driving out, and yeah, it's been a wild ride since. I think that was right around when that was the winter when Prince died. And then basically, and this is kind of one of the things I've been thinking about is as far as Minnesota goes, everybody always thinks of like unrest and the things going on there, but it's been like a string of police shootings and eventually just a bunch of things happening, and then leading up to George Floyd, and then lived through the obviously the pandemic, and then coupled with the George Floyd uprisings and kind of things that happened there, and then obviously there's other police shootings that have happened since that weren't as well publicized, but locally here they've been. So we've had our fair share of state brutality, police brutality, whether it's localized or federalized, and honestly with George Floyd, we had the guard come in too. So we saw federal violence, but yeah, it's been a crazy time. So I've been here about 10 years. Obviously, it's not like this place is on fire. This is one of the best places I've ever been. Obviously we grew up in Indiana, Northwest Indiana, so outside of Chicago suburbs. Basically it doesn't really feel like it was Indiana per se. You get the like real Hoosier experience, I guess. But it's basically, yeah, I mean, I feel like when I moved here, my taxes were way higher. I got a raise, and I remember when I was looking at my first paycheck, I was like, "You guys," because I was transferring within my company, and I was like, "You guys messed it up. I did not get a raise." And they're like, "No, it's right." And it was just the tax difference took up my whole raise and everything. So there's that. I remember being like, "Holy cow!" But then once you get here, you're like, "Oh crap!" Like there's services, our schools are functional. There's problems here and there, but as far as that, like our government is actually functional. We're not they spend money on things for public good. There's services that you get that I wouldn't even imagine, in other states that I've lived at. It's been a great time here. We have a amazing outdoor industry. I took part in that. I worked at REI for about 6.5 years there. So I have a very emotional tie to the natural beauty of the state, as well as the park systems, things like that. Also, I spent a fair amount of time helping people get ready for the boundary waters, things like that. So, even right now, the boundary waters are under attack. We've got, they're looking to start mining them, like the national, federal government is and stuff. They want to sell the rights off to like an Ecuadorian company, so it's just crazy. So we've got environmental battles going on here. We've got social battles, obviously racial tensions. We've got all types of things happening here. But all in all, I think about it and it's like, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now. If I were in the United States, I don't think I would be, after everything I've experienced and kind of seen here, and the people and everything about it. So yeah, it's been great. But what about you? I know you were obviously, from Northwest Indiana, but you probably moved a few places since, I imagine.
Yeah, I was mostly in the Midwest. So I was still like, sorry, I'm like trying to trace it all back, but yeah, after we graduated, after Andrean, right, in Maryville, I went to University of Chicago and did that for 4 years, and then I actually did a brief stint for a program in Philadelphia. I was only out there for a few months, but then I came back to South Bend in Indiana. So I really, for the most part, stayed, or like, in the immediate aftermath, I stayed mostly in Indiana or kind of around that area. But now I'm in Boston. I've been in Boston. This will be my 8th year of being in Boston. So we are kind of firmly entrenched, right? We first got out here, I wasn't really feeling it. It's not that I didn't like Boston at all. It was just kind of like, I'm here for work and I want to get back to Chicagoland as quickly as I can. My wife really wasn't feeling it. She really didn't want to be in Boston when we first got here, but now she's locked in. It's like, we're just going to be here. It's best for her work because she's a business account manager, or like kind of like a, sales director for these companies that work with biopharmas. So like data licensing and services and things like that. So this is a great place for her. I mean, it's one of the biggest tech and biotech and hospital hubs, medical hubs in the nation. So it can't be any better for her, really. For me, it's also solid because I came out here for media. I worked at WBUR, which is a public radio station out here, one of the NPR stations.
Okay.
So I started out working there, and I've been there like on a couple of different stints, but now I'm working with a nonprofit, Embrace Boston, that's racial justice oriented. So yeah, kind of like that experience of both like leaving home and really kind of settling in elsewhere. And I actually have family that live in that lived in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area, the Twin Cities for 30 years, whatever it is. I went out there, I go out there every once in a while to go visit my cousins. My favorite aunt lives out there, and her 3 daughters. So yeah, like I got a lot of family that I love that live out there. And so for me, it's been, since all this has popped off at the beginning of the year, right, checking in with them and seeing how they're doing. It's a lot. And it's a lot to see. Obviously posting about it, what's on the ground. I interviewed Georgia Fort before she was arrested. It's wild to, I think, see people that, again, from a kind of a similar area, I think similar kind of background and communities to what we grew up in. It's like imagining it happening in like Maryville, Indiana, or like Hobart, or like wherever we grew up. And it's like, it's not hard to sort of put yourself in those shoes, when you think about it. But I know for me, it's like, from your perspective, you mentioned, being there for a bunch of, the police shootings and, police brutality. Now you've got federal agents doing it all. Like, how did you decide, to start, I think, speaking, like being more vocal about it, right, on socials and doing this, because it's scary, in a way to put yourself out there.
And like you said, so obviously, you've kept up with me at least on Facebook. So you see me posting, I would say chronically online, probably for the past, what, like 10 years or something, as far as politics go, certainly. And yeah, things going on around me. So I guess I would just like to say, so, going back to Northwest Indiana, it's definitely an area where there is, when we were in school, we learned about white flight, and there's definitely, although there's diversity in the area, there's certainly a lot of like unofficial kind of segregation and things, and communities separations and things like that. And it is something that we grew up like learning about. And I don't know, I guess I always was kind of perplexed at like kind of the stupidity behind it, of just like these people just literally picking up their communities and just running south. And I mean, what is it like? I think it was like south of Notre Dame. I think, is it like Penn or something? I believe Penn High School, or what is it?
Yeah, Penn's out there in that
Well,
area. Yeah.
Penn, that whole community started because of the forced segregation of busing in South Bend. And so a lot of those white affluent people ran the hell out of there they started their new community, and Penn is like this, hey, I believe they're 5A, or I don't know what the ratings are now, but a
Yeah.
like extraordinarily wealthy a sports
Yep.
program. Like it's like the top of the line stuff. They pulled all that money out there so fast, and boom, the place, the town was basically like erected out of nothing and is like this like sports mecca for the area. So if you're from
Yeah.
Indiana, you surely have seen them in many state championships and whatever.
Well, yeah, yeah. Because I used to when I lived in South Bend, I actually did some sports report. So I mean, first of all, like we would in football, we would scrimmage Penn, right? So we would go out there like before the season, and we would go and scrimmage them, or like we would see them around at football camps and stuff like that. Because our football team was, I mean, still is like very good, but obviously they're bigger, and they got like all these like crazy athletes out there. But yeah, when I was living in South Bend, I was a graduate student. After I got my master's, I did some sports reporting, on a part time sports reporting, 14 hours a week. And so then, yeah, like I was going to a lot of Penn games, actually like girls basketball, their team that year was like, I think they lost at semi-state or something like that. But yeah, no,
And so are their
they were
facilities too.
really, yeah, they were really good. Yeah, it is constantly, Penn football is out here dominating. And yeah, like I remember we drove up to their locker rooms. Like I'm sure they've redone Andrean's locker rooms since we've been there. I'm pretty sure I saw some pictures of them having redone the locker rooms. But man, like their locker rooms, it felt like a college,
Yeah.
like going
Yeah.
there like, compared to what we had. So yeah, they definitely had it going on. And so that's in Mishawaka. So, it's like South Bend, and then you have Mishawaka and Granger, which are like these two more affluent areas. And you got some, like more, like private schools out there that are really good in that area. So yeah, man, I actually, fun story, when I was out there one time at the farmers market they had there, I actually sat next to Mayor Pete back when
I
he
was
was
going to
still
ask
Mayor
about that
Pete.
actually if you're there.
Yeah. And I was just like, "You're Mayor Pete, right?" And he's just like, "Yeah." He was like, "Yeah, pretty chill guy," you
Yeah.
know? But yeah, I mean, it's like a nice little area. And, obviously he was doing some things, when he was mayor, like he added some, those roundabouts, right? The rotaries and stuff like that downtown South Bend, getting
Yeah.
fancy. But yeah, it was, there's definitely like a bit of a line of demarcation out there where you have like South Bend, and then there's some areas of South Bend that are kind of rough. And then up by Notre Dame, it's a little bit more
Yeah.
like, oh, it's
And
by Notre Dame.
St.
And then
Mary's
like in
as
that
well.
area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then out there, you go north of Notre Dame, and then you're in like
Mhm.
Granger, which is, that's where like, I used to do pizza delivery
Mhm.
out there from time to
Mhm.
time, and you would have like these just straight mansions out there. Those are really nice houses. I'm like, damn, you better tip me
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, questionable. But and so basically we grew up around that. It was something that we actually were lucky. God damn it, this thing. Let me just fix this.
I got you. Also, I dig it. Great background.
Yeah, I'm trying to take the flag back. Does that look like shit? Whatever. No, so yeah, so I don't really care. So basically, yeah, we grew up with that kind of obvious well, obvious to me because I went to a school that actually talked about it. I mean, was it Mr. Zott? I remember him talking about it. Yeah. I don't even know their story, but anyways, so he taught us about that. I remember, and it was something that was it's pretty obvious if you live there, when you start to see it, you're like, oh, this makes sense. So that happened. I obviously grew up around, the area, even like Andrean, like, that was more diverse for me than, Cherville, obviously. So you get to, meet more people of color. Obviously there's a larger Latino, Black, Mexican, Puerto Rican populations there as well. So that was like a good experience for me, meeting other people, and, I don't know, it's just normal as hell to me, it's just like people you go to school with. So but like, I remember going to, obviously I was like pretty conservative because of my family, and we're Catholic and all that stuff. So growing up, I was probably more conservative than most, just out of my parents and stuff like that. And so I remember being like, in class, like the one debating for all these conservative things and like abortion and all this shit. It's like I just was whatever. It was what I taught, what I was taught. And so I remember economic conservatism and all this stuff, business, whatever. And so I remember going to college and, kind of leaning more libertarian because I was like, want to smoke pot and, whatever. Like, I don't know. I was like, and plus, I think at the time, and some libertarians will just say are generally just don't think that race is, they're just like, we don't give a shit, so some of them will just say, so the more like true ones will say. And so I remember being like, well, this is stupid, I don't really care about that, I don't care if you're gay or whatever, none of that stuff is
Right.
really, something that I ever cared about. And so I remember eventually just being like, well, maybe not, I'm not going to defend it, but I could at least explain you why people think this way. And then eventually I'm just like, yeah, what am I, this is just stupid, and but you see the real world. It wasn't like I was liberally indoctrinated. I just met other people, and it just went against the
Yeah.
beliefs that I originally had. And then, so it was like I saw it with my own eyes. I went out. I was in sales, so I was out in the market. I got to see like the awful things happening in the free market and how that works. And it's like, you start to make your own you start to make your own beliefs after that. So it wasn't like someone told me something. No, I saw it for myself. So then I started to, I think it was around the 2015 is when what Trump and Bernie Sanders were both in that election. And really, the whole Bernie thing for me was like, that was like a breath of fresh air the first time. So, Chicago politics, Northwest Indiana politics are slimy. There's tons of corruption on both sides. There's people in jail on both sides. So for me, I just thought all politics was just like grimy and, and likely to be corrupt. Not all, but, but it felt like it. And so that was the first time for me that I started to see someone actually talk about those things. So when I moved to Minnesota, obviously we had all those shootings. And this is, when I was in high school and then when I was in college, I certainly smoked lots of weed. I sold weed to people and, did plenty of things that, were certainly illegal. Maybe not so much now where I am in Indiana, they still are, so everything I was doing is
Yeah,
still
I know,
illegal
right?
there. And so, obviously I'm an adult. I got kids, I take care of my shit. I'm not a drug user. I don't, I'm sober. I don't drink. I don't do anything. So, I've grown up, but like Jesus Christ. So I remember every time we go through one of those shootings, typically the person dies in a situation where nobody knew their name, nobody knew who they were, they didn't know their background. It was just a happenstance thing where, they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and something happens and it gets escalated, Philander Castile or something, or whatever. The person ends up dead, and then what happens immediately? It's the spin game of let's go dig into their life. Let's go dig into all this stuff. And I found it very tough after all these things happen when people would look at something that this person did that was something that I did, maybe even worse, and say this is why they should die.
Yeah.
And when you have people that are your own family, your own friends, and your whatever, saying that this is enough of a reason for this person to die, and I've done way worse, in some instances, that to me was like one of the, yeah. And I could certainly just be like, whoo, I'm lucky, and just move on. I could, but there's like something at the bottom of, at the pit of me that just is like doesn't sit right with that. And so that was one thing that really started to get me to talk about, race more and social issues like that, because I was like, this is just not fair. And like the over policing of neighborhoods of color and things like that. I mean, I was basically running around at a gang with my friends in high school selling drugs and doing all this shit, but we were in a white neighborhood, and so nobody really cared, I don't know. And so I've had multiple interactions with the police where it would have for anybody else, it would have been like the life-changing event. And they're like, I remember police being and all. So I lived in Cherville. All my friends went to like LC. And so because I was let's say doing stuff that I wasn't supposed to do, I was like, I don't want to hang out with people from Andrean, and I'll keep my, social and my school life separate, and it just kind of worked out better that way. But anyway, so I remember getting pulled over with a car full of people, and they'd be like, "Oh, this kid, look at all this, he's got all these stupid arrests or whatever." And then they'd get to me and be like, "Andrean, you go to a nice school, you must be a good kid. All right, we're gonna let you guys go today." What? So even my friends were able to benefit from my little bit of even like local privilege, and we were all white. So it's like, so yeah, so I had things like that. I wasn't like, I don't think I was like rich per se growing up. But we were well off. I don't have college debt. That's rich for a lot of people. Shit, so yeah, I mean, I was definitely had my own relative privilege growing up, and I felt like at some point it was like, oh man, this is really unfair. And I knew, I'd talk to people, who were my age and who were maybe like way smarter than me and way more skilled, and were, in my opinion, probably someone who should be more employable than myself, talking about opportunities like they're like they couldn't imagine getting a job the way I talk about it, or like things like that. And it was like what, you're totally competent, or you have this. And they're like, no, 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 so I think I started to realize that, oh, I certainly exist in a separate, existent, like I'm on there's a lower bar for me, that I could just like scoot over, basically, that everybody else has to jump or whatever over, and I just didn't, I don't know, I wasn't comfortable with like being silent about that. Cause and then, there's times where, okay, you're in the open market, and you go to a company and it's like, oh shit, you know, maybe they make their hiring decisions based off of like loyalty or friendship or things like that, not based on actual skill or whatever, And then all of a sudden, maybe that starts to turn into, maybe not officially skin color, but it could start to look like patterns exist and things like that, and you start to see people that you're like, you're way more competent than any of the people here. Why are you, in this position, and why are you unable to move around? And these other people that are just, bullshitters are flying through it out of loyalty and stuff like that. And I don't know, some of that stuff, it just really, I saw a lot of these things that really made me feel uneasy. I've always been posting about it on my Facebook, as far as privately within my Facebook, but obviously I've been loud enough about it that I'm like, anybody could screenshot me and I could get in trouble for it. So at any point, it's like, whatever, if you want to consider it inflammatory, which it's crazy because me like being like, you should care about immigrants or something is like inflammatory now, depending on who you are. It's just ridiculous, so I don't even care anymore. I'm not doing anything awful. I'm just speaking out for what I think is right. And then yeah, so basically, so this year happened, or 2020. So Trump, gets into office, and then it wasn't just the recent occupation. There has been ICE activity heavy in Minnesota since the year began, and since Trump came into office. And the Whipple Federal Building, which everybody sees, has been in operation since day one. So there was a lot of things that happened between then and Renee Good getting murdered. So I think there's a lot of people that when you ask them, that's the day that activated them. And, whatever, I'm not trying to shame anybody, but there's a lot of people that did not give a single shit before that, or really, we're not talking about it, they weren't doing whatever. And that was the life-changing difference. But for me, I've been watching it for a long time, and it was like, no, there's people that had been hiding in their house for months now before that. There's like, this is just a matter of, it wasn't affecting, we didn't realize it was affecting us directly. The news wasn't reporting well on it. A lot of these things are kind of hearsay, so there's a lot of like the groups reporting on it are just like independent groups and 50501, and so I ended up joining 50501, and I think it was like December, and then all of a sudden you're like, you realize what's actually happening, and it's like, Oh, I thought it was bad. It was 100% worse than I thought. And the news just doesn't report on anything. It's all just people taking videos of themselves. And once I did that, I was like, oh my God, like I think it was we started there's like, hotels. They were staying in the hotels in my town. We found out about that. They announced that in the whole state of Minnesota in December, they announced that, oh, they were going to put out all these detention centers, and they listed Minnesota, and it was Woodbury, Minnesota, where I live, and it was like less than a mile from my house, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like an Amazon warehouse next door to an Amazon warehouse. Like we're gonna put in a concentration camp, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. So all those things were happening late December, around Christmas break ish time, And so I remember it just being like more tense by the day for people paying attention, and then I think I like was going to the hotels and like just driving through and seeing, because you could see the cars, you start to understand what to look for. And it was like, okay, maybe I'd see like 20 cars a day. And that whole week, I'd drive by like once a day. And then the day, January 6th, I remember that night. What day of the week was that? I think, let's see, was that a Wednesday? I think that was a Tuesday,
Not sure
because
when it fell
J6
on there.
was,
Apparently, it was a
yeah,
Tuesday.
okay. So J6, that was a big day, because that was what happened that day. Well, obviously it was it was obviously the, anniversary of January 6th and everything. But I
Yeah,
remember
5 years.
going to I forget if there's something else happening here. But anyways, I remember going to the hotel that day, driving through and seeing 50, 60 cars, something like that. It was like, holy shit. And I just remember having this sinking feeling where I was like, something bad is going to happen. And so that night I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. And so I stayed up all night, and it was like, people aren't understanding this. People aren't understanding what's going on. The news is so, it's so, I don't know. It's bullshit right now. Unless it's independent. Independent's not getting enough reach. Any mainstream news is just like not giving you the full story. They don't really understand the depths of what's going on, like the actual like what people are living through, and the social, and talking about it, just conversations like this. So none of that stuff was kind of getting through. People didn't really understand it. And I remember, I just decided to make I think I originally called it, it was like Twin Cities Defense and Information Network. So I was like, I just wanted to just put something out there. So I was like, someone needs to be reporting on this stuff. So I originally thought I'd do it like that, as like a news page. So I didn't add anybody additionally. I didn't say anything about it. I just started posting, and with nobody on there, and just started putting stuff in there, just taking like local news and just sharing it all in the same place. And then literally it was, January 7th is, Renee Good. And so that was like 10 a.m. I remember it was a really slow day, because, at work, I was just kind of like waiting for everybody to come back from vacation and everything after New Year's. And so I remember I was just kind of out on my phone, and I remember it was Andrew Mercado was going live. And he's like, hey, I'm just responding to the scene of a, shooting. We know there was a shooting here. We don't know what happened here. So, you know, he walks up to the scene, and then basically that was the rest of my day, was that was on in the background. It was like, um, and yeah, so I just, I don't know. I think at that point that really just, it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, it was certainly was a turning point. Obviously, I'd been paying attention for a while, but that's when it became, yeah, like a lot more real. Yeah, I find it hard to say, but yeah, once they started shooting white people, then it's like, holy fuck, not gonna lie, it does get a little scarier. So that happened, and that activated a lot of people. There's a lot of, our town got organized locally, which is great. There's people out there feeding people that are afraid to leave their homes, which is still happening.
Yeah,
The fear
it's
hasn't stopped. The people haven't, and, a lot of people, at first it was people weren't showing up to work. Then people start quitting, and then, or have to get fired because they are just, their jobs just won't let them. And it's like, well, you either are going to come in or you got to go. So a lot of people lose their jobs. You've got families that are just like living in hiding. People stop going to school. I know, like St. Paul in particular, Minneapolis, they talk about the uh, what's the word? The attendance rates are just abysmal right now. People are afraid to leave their homes. And this is where I'm like, I kind of like liken this to, it's almost like a blockade or whatever. And I feel like it's like an economic blockade. And what happened earlier in the year? I think did they? What was the official ruling? I feel like they did something to like criminalize homelessness, so places can, yeah. I believe there is something that happens. So it's almost like they criminalize homelessness. They put this like, there's nobody officially, there's no fence around your house or some shit like that, but they're going to intimidate people from going to work, from going to, hey, we're going to have ICE agents sitting at the grocery store, we're going to have them sitting at the pharmacy, we're going to have them sitting outside of your daycare, outside of your, the hospital, the healthcare, like anything that you need to sustain life. There's ICE agents patrolling those areas, and it got like to the point where I could, I live in the suburbs, man. It is not like, there's diversity out here, but it's like, it's like just a nice little town here, you know. And I literally couldn't leave my house without seeing federal agents. I mean, driving around neighborhoods, driving just to the store. Like I live a block from Target and I drive a block and see an ICE agent. And it's just crazy. So that's happening. And I think at some point people, a lot of the restaurants either they like shut down temporarily. Some of them came back and they were like locked their doors and basically were like people had to knock and they'd like let them in. So it was like they're doing like special security. It's pissing off patrons, stuff like that. And also, if you're an ethnic restaurant and you serve your ethnic community, hey, they're scared and they don't want to come out and buy food, or maybe they don't have the money to because now they're not working. So it's just like this butterfly effect that ripples through the community, and eventually it's like, okay, well now we're at the point. I mean, we're past it now, but we're additionally really was February, at the start of February rent's due, and now March rent just went due. A lot of these people are getting kicked to the curb. And what was it? We have a manufactured home park like right outside of town from us, in the neighboring town here. On my first podcast there, I had the person who's like the president of the owners association or something there. She was talking about it basically, and the owners of the park were colluding with the ICE agents and like telling them who to go after, and then sending eviction notices to their people saying, hey, like, you were late on rent, and they're ready to kick them the fuck out there. So this person is using all this to their advantage to try to rid themselves of tenants they don't like and things like that. And
Yeah.
I actually think it's interesting because you kind of mentioned I what it was like imagining it, seeing it happen to people that we know at home, but it almost kind of did though, because Chicago Midway Blitz happened in November, and that was actually before. And so that did have spillover into Northwest Indiana. And I think one of the reasons why I'm being vocal right now was because I remember seeing that and being like expecting someone I know to say something about it. Like someone, anyone. And trust me, I'm sure there's people that post in places outside of Facebook. So I'm not going to say that's the only way that, the only barometer of how people are doing. But, you're like, God, is someone going to say anything? And if they did, I just must have just not seen it. But yeah, it was really hard for me. And we're Catholic too. So who do we know back home? It's like large amounts of, Catholic people, and when we're supposed to be charitable and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And so I remember, what's the building called? Broadview. So Broadview, Illinois. They have their little detention center there. And that is just, it's, what is that? I think Broadview is like a southern suburb, I believe. So it's like, it's not far from Northwest Indiana. It's, easily accessible. And hey, there is a Catholic church there that does a Eucharistic procession every Sunday to try to go bring, the the Eucharist to people in detention there, which is a constitutional right. If you don't know, I know you do, but obviously for people listening, it is a constitutionally protected right to be able to receive the sacraments, to be able to pray, or do what you need as far as religious protections within confinement. So I remember showing that to all the people I know, like, hey, look, I know you're super Catholic. Look at this, it's right by you. You could go. And literally, I'm telling you, every single person I told you to, silence, like did not respond. Like we were having a conversation, it stopped then. So whoever I talked to, it was like the second you present them with these things of, hey, here's the Catholic group that cares about this. Why don't you go? Not my deal, So I think all those things, that was very disappointing. So yeah, I mean, it did happen to people that we know. I know people in local government in Northwest Indiana that are, fighting against the libs, or, trying to put in anti-ICE stuff in our, town bills or whatever, we'll just keep it at that, and it's just disappointing. And it's like, is it people that I expected to do any better? No, but, it's just ridiculous. So yeah, it did happen to people we know in some sense, but that was right around Halloween. And so what was happening during Halloween? It was like kids in Chicago were out trick or treating. And Greg Bovino shows up and starts fucking tear gassing them. Starts, I know there's some big like Halloween thing that happened. There's guys out in Halloween masks in Chicago, like ICE agents terrorizing people in Halloween masks. All these things happen. And then you go on Facebook, and then it's all the people I know, trick or treating with their kids and stuff. And that's when you're like, yeah, we live in different, it's not even just different worlds, different fucking universes sometimes, and they're right there. You could drive there. It's 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you're living in a complete different reality. So to me, I just found that to be extremely objectionable. It's one thing to support it, that's bad enough. But honestly, to me, I don't think anybody's like, oh man, these Trump supporters, are we going to turn them at this point? I don't really think that's what I'm worried about. I think these people are, whatever. At the end of the day, I do want to fight for their rights, and I want them to be better off as humans and stuff like that. But do I think they're going to change their mind? I don't think at this point, but the people that I am most upset and I guess just disappointed with are the people, it's the good people that refuse to just like stand up and say anything and just be like, this is enough, and whatever. So the reasonable people or blah blah blah. So all those people that are still just like kind of living their lives just like hoping this doesn't directly affect them, that's where I've kind of yeah, I'm just like, every time I talk to people at home, I I know it. I could hear the conversation of what I am telling you, and I could see that you're like, I'm crazy. You think I am crazy. You don't believe me. And, my reality is like, not, I think people just think I'm making it up. My family, they don't, I think they think I'm just dramatic, So at some point, it was like, I just got sick of convincing people that I know and care about, because I kind of was like, well, at some point, I think they don't give a shit either. So I was like, well, if the national media is going to keep spinning this, and whatever. I mean, I see reasonable people still saying some of the dumbest things. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, at least maybe I was an immigrant and I tried really hard to do things legally. Why didn't they? Well, it's not just that, it's not just immigrants. It's like anybody who looks like you could have an accent. And I mean, honestly, you just being yourself, like you could have people come up to you and say, where are your papers? Where are you from? I don't fucking have papers. I don't have a passport. I've never left this country. Do you know how fucking stupid that is? The fact that I have no reason to be worried about that, but other people do, that were born here and that are just as American as me. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So anybody who's not talking about it is willingly deciding to overlook that, in my opinion. I mean, there's some people I think that maybe they're just really out of the loop. But I mean, for God's sakes, it seems like the most people, it's just they just don't want to get uncomfortable. Maybe they don't want the social implications or whatever the fuck it is. I don't know. I'm over it. Honestly, at this point, this is not the world that I want to raise my kids in. I've got young kids as well. If nobody speaks up, we're just gonna fall down even farther in this. And I would rather not escape this country in the way that we may have to. I would rather stay here because I've done a lot here and I've built up relationships and I met people and look, so the flag. I am not someone who adorns the flag generally. It is not something that I do. But I think this is, this country is like obviously represents a lot of horrible things in the past. There's a lot of horrible things. So I know there's a lot of people that see the flag and are like, and I get it. And I also get that feeling now. But I think, it's almost like the American, the US is almost like a ghost ship and it was taken over by corporations, corporate interests, all these big money interests and things like that. Maybe white nationalists now, also, religious extremists and stuff like that. So all those things are the case. But I think we have the ability to take it. And as people, I think the good things about America are when we do recognize, hey, we fucked up really bad, that there are times when we do actually do things about it. And I know a lot of those have been half measures, maybe not perfect. I mean, shit, even the 13th Amendment, we still have slavery here. So it's like, I feel like as people, we need to take the flag back and take the imagery back and take those things and say, no, fuck you. We could, we have a better image of America and we have a better, a vision moving forward. So obviously it's flipped, we're a nation in distress. And I just refuse to sit here and not acknowledge that. I'm really not like a huge flag person, but and I do, I have family who is in the military. I have friends who are currently, actually, I think they're probably overseas right now. I have family, I think that's overseas as well. I don't think the military is just like for nothing. I understand that there's bad things and bad, whatever, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing fucking awful things around the world. But I also like, I've kind of met a lot of different in doing this. I've met a lot of people, when you do this work, it seems like a lot of the people doing activism or helping the community it's largely women. Just going to be honest. So it's mostly women out here. But of the men that I've met, the ones that were not just like super progressive already and it just kind of worked, most of them were former military, former DHS, former whatever, people's State Department, different areas where they're like, you know, they were in the government and they actually maybe did serve this country honorably. They did actually believe in something. They actually, and we could debate about all the different wars and stuff that we've gone in, and I think that's certainly right. But there's something that has certainly changed, for the worse. And so if we were bad before, now it's like we're super baddies. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of those people though that are really big into it. And so I met the Vets for Peace. One of the videos I had posted was the chapter president in Minneapolis. She goes out to protests with like a megaphone and we have the National Guard there because they're deployed right now, sitting there literally just sitting in their Humvees, just huffing diesel fumes, running their Humvees like 24 hours a day. It's just ridiculous, and just sitting there in like riot gear waiting for nothing to happen, and so they're pulled away from their homes. So these people are like, they can't work their job right now. And so they have to, I mean, I'm laughing because it's ridiculous, not because I actually think it's awful, but it's just so stupid. Like they've pulled these people out of their homes. They're sitting there in Humvees. They're away from their families. They're away from all that. And it's just dumb. And so the Vets for Peace people, they're sitting there, they would go with a megaphone and start, talking to them about it. Like, hey, maybe you didn't know what you were signing up for. Maybe you were just a kid and, didn't want to go to college or something, or who knows, whatever the case may be, you didn't sign up for this. I'm sure you didn't. And kind of like talking about some of the moral implications and being able to be what's it called when you, object conscientious, being a conscientious objector, and hey, you could do that. You could actually do this. This is someone who did it. I did it, as that person saying, so it was really moving to kind of meet them. I'm going to join, as a non-veteran or just as a, ally, I guess, or whatever. You could join as well. They've been out there very, very much as far as like anti-war protests, as well as, doing this, so I just have seen a lot of people that did give their lives for this and are basically like have this feeling of you just like spit on our entire legacy, any honor that we had, any, whatever, uh any rules that we had to follow, the high bar of, just how they had to behave over these years. It's all just like thrown away. And then you see what's happening now. And it's like, I don't know. I think a lot of them just feel like, I'm sure many of them have friends that died and gave their lives for something. And, a lot of people back when we were kids, it was like, 9/11 happened and the world, god, we had no idea what's going on compared to now, so 9/11 happened, and then they just turned on the media, war machine. I don't know if you even realize this, but they didn't even do like doing the national anthem wasn't a big event at games, things like that. The NFL took like a ton of money from the Department of Defense to make these like huge things, so I don't know, the army became just like this big thing. I think a lot of people thought they were fighting for something, So there's a lot of people that gave their lives for this. Like you come back now and it's like, what did I do? And I just feel awful. Um, but I don't know, it's just crazy to see all that. So I don't know kind of where I'm going with this, but anyways, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, I think you wanted to talk about like parenting and stuff like that during this.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So you said you had young kids. How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
So yeah, I've got a 6-year-old.
That's been one of the things, and I think anybody in America is probably dealing with this to some extent. It's just been a weird time, as far as like talking to your kids about what's going on in the country or like being nice to one another. And then you see the president just like, yeah, so things like that. So like general civility, things like that. I feel like it's just kind of it's almost like a joke now. But we still continue to. I would say we're definitely like unconventional. We, really when it comes down to it, we're not religious anymore. We just teach our children to love other people and treat people well. And, I have the same values and the same, moral belief systems and things like that, but I don't need a, organized religion in order to do that, so I would say we do a lot to, just try to push that within our children so they're not like thinking of people as others or different things like that. Or like we've, even if you have times where they'll say something that like another kid said that's like racist or something and we're like, like we gotta stop, so we tend to that stuff and we talk to them. It's not like we're like going after them, but we explain to things, that's not right. And and so we brought my son, he went to the No Kings in June, and we were talking about bringing him to that for a while. We didn't go to like the big one, like because that was like too much, and he's overwhelmed with the crowds, things like that. So that's like wouldn't be the right place. But anyways, so the day that happened, so Melissa Hortman, our state senator, was assassinated. So like,
Yes,
and
yes,
the killer
like one of
was
those.
on the loose.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, and that's crazy. That event right there, I remember, I think it happened overnight. So that happened overnight. I don't know if it was actually I think it was in the early morning. So it was technically that Saturday. And I remember even like telling one of my neighbors, I was like, hey, I know you don't pay attention to the news, but you might want to stay away from downtown or something. Like who knows what's going on? There's a killer loose, number one, but like if there's some big, protest going on, this guy literally said he was going to go attack it. In his, that's what the assumptions were when they found his car and stuff like that. There's like flyers for it. And obviously there's some people thinking that he was going to go attack it. So there's a lot of like, ooh, should we still have it? But I think they officially said it was canceled, but people still showed up. So there was a huge, protest for No Kings at the, I think it's St. Paul. And then my son and I, we went to just like a bridge one, but we basically have like talked about the idea of we just kind of likened it to a king. And I think this is the thing is, so what is it? It's like, oh, well, a lot of people are just, they don't want their kids to hear about it. They just don't talk about it, and look, I understand the thought process behind that. In Chicago during Midway Blitz, what is it? Greg Bovino left, what is it? Navy Pier in a Black Hawk helicopter. They landed on an apartment complex in the south side of Chicago on the roof.
Yep.
And at midnight, they dragged every single occupant of the building out. They zip tied children together and put them in the back of a U-Haul. Some of them were like naked or like in their diaper or whatever, you know? So yeah, and then went through and verified all their legality and then allowed them to go back after they destroyed all their apartments. And then eventually they basically, a lot of the people got evicted because or got condemned because the place was so destroyed. And, you know, those kids weren't too young to know about it. They had to deal with the effects of it. You know, there's like a family in Minneapolis. They're like out driving and ice fucking breaks their windows open and tear gas inside their car with their little kids in there, like a 6 month, I think, year old. It's just crazy, you know? So that black family, their kid was young enough to know about it. Liam Ramos, the one who was returned recently from Dilley, Texas, he's one of many, 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 many kids there. He's just the one that we talked about. So lucky
Right.
enough that people knew about Liam. A lot of the other kids that people don't know, and people aren't talking about it because they just maybe not, they're not apparently known by name or whatever, you know, but they go like fly drones and there's, you know, hundreds of kids out there. So when you see all that, yeah, I don't feel like, once again, we live in these separate worlds and I don't want my kid to think that that is normal and to allow them
Yeah.
to just be like, well, that's just how it is, you know? And so, yeah, I basically, that's really what spurred me to. Do I go out and tell them everything? Fuck no, you know, but at least, yeah, they know that ICE is in town. They know there's bad people here. And, you know, it's funny, my kids, they go to daycare, and their daycare, they have police show up and do public safety things. They meet firefighters, they meet, you know, which is great. Totally fine, you know. And I would love for them to be like, these are people in my community that are helpers that we respect and that are doing good things. And, you know, now it's like, okay, I remember talking to him and he'd be like, why don't we call the police on them? Sorry, buddy, not how it works here. Yeah, even to them, it's like, it doesn't make sense. And he's not an idiot. He's really smart, you know? And so obviously they watch cartoons, they watch things like that. There's villains. There's, you know, even Paw Patrol. It's like literally, it's like, I'm just like, well, it's, yeah, he's
Yes.
like, I used to call him Trump Humdinger. I was like, yeah, he's, you know, he's like Mayor Humdinger, you know, he's at it again, you
Yeah.
know? And so we'll like, you know, there's ways that you could do it and they get it, you know. Do you need to like paralyze them in fear? Maybe not, but I get it like at some point. And so, you know, when we were like, you know, out there helping with our town getting organized and things like that, like, you know, they were like, oh yeah, we're trying to, you know, help fight the bad people, or, you know, help protect our neighbors, stuff like that, you know. So they got it to some extent, you know, but yeah, it's tough. And so I remember during, like, you know, it's just been a tough year obviously, but I remember, and you know, when as a parent, so you have like your standards. You're like, oh, I want to get a nutritious meal or something. I want them to eat well. I want them to sleep at, you know, a good time. I want them to play outside. I don't want them watching TV all day. You know, all these things that you'd like to do, you know, but then as reality hits, like, you know, there's certain things, well, we didn't have time to cook a good meal. I guess we'll go, you know, get fast food or something. You know what I mean? Like there's things where you're like, oh shit, we, you know, didn't do it today. So obviously we live in capitalism, and that could be just a normal thing where you're like, damn, like worked out the best of me, you know, or whatever the case may be. But I just remember when this started, it was like, yeah, it was really tough. And I remember it being like, I guess they're going to, you know, we're too distracted. I guess they're going to be watching more TV today or something, or, you know,
Got to
yeah,
survive
you know,
somehow.
and you start cutting corners because you're like we're barely scraping by, you know, we're cutting corners in our own self-care, let alone, you know, then it starts to ripple into their lives and things like that. And, you know, before you know it, you're like, man, I'm not even taking care of myself, let alone my family. Like we gotta do something here. So that became really tough. You know, I think it's this hard thing because you're like, you're living through this, and every part of you wants to be like, everything needs to stop and we need to deal with this. But life still fucking moves on. And it's not like there's some criminal organization that can go be like dealt with. Like, no, they're funded way more than any of us. They're going to be here longer than we probably, like they got more money than God. And to me, it's just like, holy shit, man. So, yeah, I think it's yeah, one of those things where you don't want it to become a new normal, but you kind of have to find ways to like still exist in this reality, and have some type of routine and I hate it because I'm like, you know, I don't, just turn off your phone and turn off the news, and it's just like it's a really privileged thing to be able to do because there's certain people that literally like they can't turn off their neighborhood chat because they might not find out that their neighborhood is having something happen or that their neighbor is getting stolen or something. Like it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. So it is a really big privilege to be able to do that stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. I struggle with it. And we're still living through it. Now it's like we're kind of back to that. Like it almost feels like we're before the Blitz again because everybody just thinks it's not happening. And it's like, no, it's still here, you know. But yeah, it's tough. And then obviously you've got Department of Education is, what it is. And is it even still a thing? Did they abolish? I don't even know if it wouldn't even matter if it did. I
I
forgot.
think technically it still exists, but it's like highly phased out or just like kind of gutted, you
Yeah,
know what
and
I
it's
mean?
run by the McMahons, and they're also dealing with another like pedophilia or human trafficking scandal as well. So it's like, you've got just like I have no faith in that. You've got like Maha coming after, and I just remember this, and autistic people will never be able to hold a job, get a date. It was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, he went out and said that. I don't know if you remember that speech. Kennedy came out and gave this like stupid speech being like basically what like autistic people are just like this waste on society or some shit. It's just the dumbest thing I've ever fucking heard. So you've got sentiments like that. You've got people being like, oh yeah, like, my wife took Tylenol and that's why like it's just fucking stupid. I don't know.
We are in the age of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
intellectualism, I should say.
yeah. And it's like the cool thing to do. It seems like for some
Yes,
people.
it's fetal.
So it's tough. But this is I don't know, that's one of those tough things because it's like at the same time he's also allowing all these like lowering the bar for safety for pharmaceutical companies or all these other companies that are existing. They're just like, oh yeah, we're just taking away all the safeguards and stuff that we have. So it's not even like they actually give a shit about it. It's like a guise, and then they're also just like removing all the protections that we have in other cases. Like, oh yeah, we don't need to go inspect these, chicken slaughtering plants or anything. We don't need to inspect the beef anymore. We don't need to inspect the lettuce. Which, I mean, how many times have you seen, even just like before Trump and anything, or being like a recall on lettuce and people are dying over like E. coli and stuff? It's like, yeah, you got issues. I mean, and some of it, they're like, oh yeah, we won't give bathroom breaks to the people in the field, so they'll just like piss in the field. Well, they're pissing on your food. So it's like, well, yeah. So I mean, it's like there's like, I don't know. So I digress. But anyway, so living under this, it's a tough existence. I just like to ask for you. You're not white. So what's that experience like for yourself in the sense of like, not being in the general diaspora that doesn't feel unaffected right now? Like you have more of a reason to feel uncomfortable because of the situations and shit going on.
Here in Boston, like in greater Boston, we haven't had a whole lot of enforcement. Like I've actually been walking around in downtown Crossing at times and seen DHS agents roaming around. They're not kind of actively kind of doing anything. They're just walking around, but they're there. In greater Boston, though, in the kind of surrounding suburbs and such, there have been a bunch of blitzes and, enforcement, and people are scared to go to school. Same. I think Boston as a city has been so vocally opposed to ICE enforcement, even though they're around. Like, as a matter of fact, I think I heard at one point that some of them had been camping out, like a couple of blocks from my
Mhm.
house, and like kind of setting up shop, by this courthouse. And there's a cemetery over there by this courthouse. So like, yeah, like 2 blocks away. we haven't really heard that much going on in Boston because I think the moment it happens, Estonians are going to be, they're going to be
Mhm.
out. They're going to be combing the streets trying to find out where they're at. And I think, Boston has a reputation so Boston has a reputation to outsiders as being, kind of this racist place, like very MAGA. Like I would say it's got a bad history when it comes to
Mhm.
racism, but most of Boston is pretty progressive. And so, especially the area that I live in, Jamaica Plain, very woke, as we would say. So I think that if they turned up and were making a big deal out of it, nah, they would have every person from like blocks away, showing up to come do something. But I think for
Yeah.
myself, it's interesting because I made a comment last week that, particularly around sports, because I've done a lot of sports journalism, that it's okay for people to be a lot is like a hot take for some people because they think that politics has no place in sports, which is stupid. I mean, of
Yeah.
course it does. Politics has a place in
Yeah.
everything. Okay. This isn't
Mhm.
Madden. So the people that play
Or
sports,
people.
they have political
Yeah.
opinions, right? They're taxpayers. They live here. They work here. And they should have an investment in our
Society.
political systems. And so the idea that like, oh yeah, like if you play, sports, you shouldn't be political. Get out of here, man. Okay, stop. Now, I will say that, the comment that I made was basically like, yeah, you should be allowed, if you're a sports media or you're an athlete or whatever, you should be allowed to voice your opinions. You just need to be prepared to stand on what you say. So if you are, for example, the U.S. hockey team coming back from the Olympics after just having won gold, and you have the call in the locker room with President Trump, which again in itself isn't necessarily the most
Yeah,
eventful
yeah.
thing, though. Again, you want to call the women because they don't fit his idea of cool and interesting, right? He like to cozy up to people that are, make them look cool, make them look hip, make them look masculine, right? So yeah, the men's hockey team, we're gonna cozy up to them. So they do that whole thing. They got Cash Patel over there partying in the locker room, looking goofy, right? So it just and then it's like you just got to understand when you do that, and particularly like you want to feels like, well, it's not political to wrap yourself in the flag. Yeah, it is.
Mhm.
Of course it
Yeah.
is. I'm not saying that that's necessarily like this awful thing. I'm just saying that it is
Mhm.
these days because who are the people more often than not, walking around wrapping themselves draped in flags,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Just saying. So you got to understand that stuff has a message. People think a certain kind of way about it when they see you doing that. And I had people being like, obviously, like, first of all, you're crazy. Come on, dude. That's a stupid opinion or whatever. And then somebody immediately is just like, look at you. You must be terrified of living in this Trump world. And I'm like, why?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, you see my face on social media. I'm not
No.
hiding it. My avatar isn't Mark
No, no.
Bellhorn, former Red Sox player. It's like you see me, when I say something, I'm very conscious of the fact that, anybody who has a problem with it and might want to do something, they can see that. I don't care. I don't care because I have lived like this and looked like this my entire life. And growing up in Northwest Indiana, which again, it's like there, depending on where you
Yeah.
go, right? It's like it's not that
Yeah,
big of
for
a
sure.
deal. But growing up in like Hobart, Indiana, in particular, it's like, yeah, I have always been the outcast,
You've heard
right?
enough
So
stupid comments.
is it that
For sure.
yeah, stupid comments or like, wow, you sound too smart,
Yeah.
like, you're trying to sound white. And I'm like, so what are you trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah, for
But I
sure.
think, yeah, so it's like, I gotta say, listen, for a place that, and I don't care if you put this in
No, it's
anywhere,
fine.
for a place that, had, such a great reputation, Andrean had to have some of the dumbest ass people I know.
I agree. I agree.
Just, and again, maybe it was just because we were in high school and everybody's an idiot in high school, but nah, man, like there are people saying some
What I would
stupid
say,
ass.
of the people that I still am friends with, like on Facebook, we'll just say, what was the one thing that I've seen from them talk about in God the past 5+ years? We are Charlie Kirk. Like people posting about Charlie Kirk dying. Like I saw quite a few people that I was like, I didn't even know you still exist. And that was the thing that you decided to stand up on your
I mean, listen, but I think for a lot of people, he represents, because I have family members who are kind of saying the same thing. To him, like, they're not always thinking about, again,
Yeah. No,
everything
I get.
is political, but a lot of people aren't thinking about him in that way. They're like, oh, well, he talks about
Yeah.
religion and God and, Christianity, and that makes me feel seen. That makes me feel like something that, he cares about stuff that I care about. And then you're not paying attention, or you kind of just like, whatever, man, that's crazy when people bring up the fact that he's like, yeah, like, if you're a black airline pilot, I immediately think you must be unqualified because DEI made me feel that way. Like, nah, dog, that's a you problem. That's not, like, for example, that's not a me problem. I didn't make you think nothing, right? And it's like the policy of, you see a black person, because we've been trying to tell you that black people are historically excluded from certain spaces. And your first thought is, how dare you mention that? Well, because you made me think about it. Well, I call me a racist then, because I'm thinking you must not be qualified.
Dude.
So it's like, yeah, that's the kind of thing that, look, people connect with people for whatever reasons they do. That's all I'm going to say in regards to Senor Kirk. However, for me, in the end, I can't change anything about this.
Yeah, for sure.
I've never wanted to.
Why would you?
I think there are a lot of people. Well, I think there are a lot of people that, you're put in this situation where everybody's dogging you for being black, for being different or whatever. And you find yourself in that situation where it's like, man, if I could just get rid of whatever it is that makes me different, it's like, man, if only I could. I think my mom was very much just like, nah, man, you are what you are. It's not your problem. When other people treat you a certain way, that's not your problem. That's their problem. So for me, it's like, I got to think about myself and my family, right? I do have a 6-year-old daughter, right? I have a wife. So I'm constantly thinking about, safety from that perspective and what to do in certain situations. But just like for me, it's really it's nothing to me, because like, I've never not been black. I'm not going to stop being black. So what's the point in being worried about it? It's like, if you want to come get me, you're going to come get me. If you think I'm unqualified to do what I'm doing, you're going to think that regardless. I could show you my credentials. I could show you where I went to college. I could show you my resume. You don't care. So if that's how you want to play it, whatever, man. That's all you. That's your bag. I'm not going to let that mess with me. But I think, for me, that's the other thing, is that, my daughter, she's, very brown, she's brown skinned, she's got curly hair and everything. So, she's all the things that nobody likes, right? She's Mexican, Puerto Rican, and black. But I think for her, it's like, while trying to also be, like, to teach it in a way that I'm not saying like everybody else is bad, because I think, right, and people just be like, yeah, like, white people did this to black people, 70 years ago, or like they're doing this to black people now, and Trump's a racist and whatever. And it'd be like, well, black, like, it's like, so you're saying, oh, white people. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying at all. As a matter of fact, we all need to be able to live and work together. We all need to be able to see the humanity in one another. But what I do try to say is, listen, be proud of what you are. Have that, that self-love. And because I think that I grew up in a family where one side of it was very much, they didn't want me to acknowledge that I was black. Or like the fact that I was kind of like we don't want to talk about that. Like, because they didn't want to talk about being brown Puerto Ricans, you know what I mean? Or like being associated with brownness or blackness in any way was a source of shame. So then they have carried that into their adult years, and now they are, very assimilationist and caping for just this ridiculousness, right? When it's like, it doesn't have to belong to you. You are choosing to be part of that. Right. And for me, that was never a thing. That was never an option for me, because I always just knew what I was. Like, you could, and again, I grew up, very, Catholic and kind of conservative family too. But, again, I'm like balancing that with the fact that I'm growing up. And as early as like 7 years old, it's like, yeah, everybody's, you're just an American. You're not black. You're not whatever. And I'm like, why is everybody treating me like I'm black?
Why does everybody keep telling me that?
because I read the books, right? I read what they were over here
Yeah.
talking about. They were doing to black people. That's what they're doing to me. So my conclusion is that you must be wrong.
Yeah.
So I think, I just don't have any interest in living in fantasy land when it comes to, who and what I am and what it
Hmm.
means. And I also feel like in another way, people want you to be scared. I think that there's a certain segment like they would love for me to be scared because they get off on that. It makes them feel strong. It
Hmm.
makes them feel like, oh yeah, I'm on the winning side and we're gonna beat you down. I'm like, please, bro, you can't. What? I'm gonna be scared of
Yeah.
you? Like you're a coward. You can't even show your
Yeah.
face. Why do I need to be worried about you? And I think that as somebody who used to study a lot of biology and biological sciences and like study predators and how they work, this is very much a predatory government, a predatory administration, and really a predatory country in a lot of ways. We're seeing it play
Yeah.
out right now on the world
Yeah, for sure.
stage. But the thing is, it's like when you stand together, if you try to be individual and you try to just bury your head in the sand, they're gonna get you. They're gonna get you every time, right? You run, you break ranks, every man for himself, they get
Hmm.
you. Okay. You band together and face outward and be like, yeah, you're not gonna do all this to you can't do it to all of us. You don't have the
Yeah.
numbers, you don't have the will, you don't have the
Correct.
courage to do all this. They back down because they're soft. Like I'm gonna keep it real. Everybody wants to talk about it's like the projections of strength, the idea of yeah, like they make us feel strong, make us feel tough. They're soft.
Hmm. For sure.
They are pretending. And the moment you call them on that, they got nothing for you. So that's why for me, please, like I'm not scared.
Yeah.
I got nothing to be scared of because I know that one day this is going to change.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that in action. I've seen the community stand up together. I've seen them do it, and obviously like our whole state stood up. And did we completely push them back? Like no. But we definitely got it to the point where they were like on a really hard roll there, and if they were keeping up the pressure that they were keeping up on us, I don't know how long we would have lasted at some point, but basically we put up so much pressure that it did get them to like back off. And I think honestly it became to the point where they were so operationally inefficient because of all the roadblocks that have been put up by our people just to slow them down, us standing together. And it's just us standing together in unity, working together, and the most unusual bonds. Like I'm talking like, this wouldn't have happened unless people went out of their comfort zone and they started talking to other communities and other people they don't normally talk to. And I used to be a lot more social. I was in sales, stuff like that. So I think at some point I really just, I think my like social battery and all that stuff, I just really got tired at some point. So I stopped being as like, like I'll just like out talking to people, small talk all the time. And recently I was like, I had to start doing it again because I was like, you're talking to like, hey, the people at the store, hey, have they been here? And it's like, oh yeah, shit, they're here every day, or ICE is out in the parking lot, or, like talking to your mailman, talking to your, like all those people in your life that I think a lot of people kind of like live, I'll say it, like, I think some people think they live above. It's like, no, these are fucking members of your community. They're your neighbors. They're human beings. They're people out there that live and work in our communities and they see what's going on. And it's like those unlikely bonds that allowed us to do this. Because if we weren't talking with those people and all those interconnections weren't happening, we'd all be standing on our own. And any group, any whatever, they could find a way to come at you. But the fact that we have all these connections made in the background, word travels fast in this state outside of social media, just through word of mouth, through signal now, through all the different things. Like there's people are moving information very rapidly and to large amounts of people. And so being just a suspicious person in our community is like enough for them to be like, hey, there's some weird people here, and there are people on notice. So it's I don't know. It's something that couldn't have happened unless we went outside of our comfort zone. And organizing, it's not something that is like super fun. It's really stressful. Like meeting all these people, you're like, maybe I have my certain beliefs, but I know a lot of other people don't. So there are times when you do have to be like, well, maybe this isn't about my politics. Maybe this isn't about whatever. This is just about standing up for the community. This is just about, and you do have to stand back from your, let's say, your immediate goals, or maybe what you would like to do, or maybe you think you could help in a certain way. But you know what, honestly, sometimes you got to listen to other people and see what they need, and not what I think they need. Or it's one of those things where you really got to kind of like take ego away. You got to do that stuff, and a lot of people aren't prepared to do that. But I would say, if you're I don't have too much time here left, but if I would just kind of wrap up, like, for communities that are where this hasn't happened yet, it's just a matter of time. This is going to come to your city. This is going to affect your
Mm-hmm.
area. They're
Mm-hmm.
buying up office spaces throughout the country. The Whipple Federal Building is a office building. It is not a detention center. They retrofitted it into a detention center, basically. So, and it's not a official one. So they just literally have people in leg irons, like, immobilized in offices. They don't have like food service there. They don't have, I mean, honestly, they might have some food courts and stuff like that, honestly, for workers, because the people working throughout the city, they can't go into any restaurants because they get kicked out. So a lot of the people have to go back there for lunch, even, but yeah, basically they're buying out office spaces, they're buying out infrastructure, they're hiring people, they're setting up networks in your town too. So I think, like, for what happened to us is that my neighborhood in my town, we got caught flat-footed. Renee Good got murdered, and everybody was like everything we did was reaction. And it was a month of just hard reactionary behavior of us just trying to like set up the networks and set up the people. But I would say, like 50501, great organization. They have all the blueprints and everything that you need to like get these things going. There's lots of organizations that have all the information. You just need to find people that are willing to stand up and do some work and be a part of their community. But if you're an individual and you're like, hey, maybe I don't have time to do that, start meeting your neighbors. Start getting your neighbors' phone numbers. Start meeting the people around you. Take a little bit more time out of your life to just like say hi to someone that you haven't met. Those little relationships are going to be invaluable when you're trying to gather information, because I'll tell you what, mainstream media, everything going on around you is going to be like, they could cover maybe like 1%, and I think that's even generous of what's actually happening, because journalists are so defunded. It's basically like, all the major newspapers and all that things have been gutted. We don't have much left, so it's like literally people going viral, sometimes even not, just posting online, like myself, about, hey, this is just what's happening. So honestly, if you have the ability and you're willing to stand up, start speaking, start working on your audiences, things like that. It's crazy. Like Mercado Media. Andrew Mercado, are you familiar with him? Okay,
No.
so during 2020, George Floyd happened, and he just like went out there and just started recording it live. It was like, it ended up just going viral, and he basically just like started a media company of just himself, and it's like basically just covering, like, he just goes out and covers protests and civil disobedience, things like that. So he's out in the streets. He even went to like Ukraine and was covering the Ukrainian war during that segment. He came back, and then Trump was reelected, and then really started covering the ICE, incursions in town and stuff. Um so he's been out there doing, literally following them out in the city and just documenting arrests, protests. He was the one that I was talking about. I watched, he was one of the first people on the scene at Renee Good's murder. Out there just documenting all this stuff. And so someone like him, he just went out and just like went live on Facebook. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, there's a point where they turned on like live, and like anybody would just randomly go live, and you'd get a notification in your pocket. Like everybody would. It's like, it was so
Yeah.
annoying. And then eventually they capped it, but now you don't have the ability to do that. So like, I was even at events where I was like, holy shit, someone needs to see this. But they put restrictions on it. So if you don't have the amount of followers that you need, if you haven't had the account for long enough, you can't go live. So honestly, like, as stupid as it sounds, like, if you want to talk, start making your accounts now. Start
Yep.
getting ahead of it, because I had times where I was like, man, I should have gone live, but I couldn't. Andrew Mercado wouldn't have been a thing had he just like not been able to go live. So they're not even, I think the mainstream media also sees it as it's competition for them too. So like, hey, we got to gatekeep who's able to get the word out, you know? So I think, I'm sure it limits bandwidth and stuff like that too. If everybody's going live for no reason, that's probably really hard on their systems or whatever, you know? But seriously though, at some point, it's like, I think a lot of that stuff has been pulled back. It's harder for people to get the word out there. If you do feel like you're comfortable talking about it, start getting those things together now. Start working on your audiences, start getting the news out there, start interacting with other creators, because I think like we live in America and everybody's like trying to compete with each other. We got to work together because we don't have big media companies. We don't have like remember when we were a kid, there used to be investigative journalists. I remember like even watching like and I'm not talking like Fox News, but the Fox affiliates, the local ones or whatever. In Chicago, I remember and shit, this is probably like even like Geraldo. You remember like a long time ago, like Geraldo, like 20 something years ago. Um, he would be like one of those dudes that would like show up to a corrupt politician like when they're like walking out of their garage or something, stick a microphone in their face and ask them some, question about some corruption or something. Like we don't have that shit largely anymore. So I mean, the best thing what did we get? Like Nick Shirley, that asshole shows up at our, the
Yeah.
Leering Center or whatever, and literally that's the reason.
And you're the kids. It's like hiding from you, goofy.
But I know that sounds so stupid, but that's the reason why the ICE incursion happened. So that was the tipping point that made them go after that, because they were like, we need to go after the Somali community and all the fraud, and so ICE was going to show up. And originally they were showing up under the guise of, we're here to investigate corruption or something, and so they just started like and then it just turned into just general racism. They're like just going after everybody, but yeah, that was the original thing. So, and it's so stupid, and he's like, paid by like foreign governments and shit he gets money from. So he's not even like, he's just a paid shill too, as well as our media and all that stuff. So like unless we need like local people to form bonds. There's so many local people that do news out here. I've met plenty of them out in the field, and they're great people. And until more of those people start to band together, which a lot of them have out here, and you see them cross posting each other's stories and each other's photography and videos and coverage and things like that. I think we all need to stand more as a community, as people in the media, and really just like kind of band together to do that. But just general people, yeah. Try to organize, try to meet people in your community, look at those tools, get Signal now, get acquainted with like trying to, I don't know, divest yourself from Google and from some of those big systems that are just tracking your every move. I mean, I'm in a shit place too. I feel like that's something I'm struggling with, trying to like get away from the
Yeah.
convenience of like Google. I mean, as a entire whole product, we'll just say, so I don't know. I mean, outside of that, yeah, just make sure you're paying attention. The news is not sufficient, and until we have more people out there speaking and more people out there listening to those people, it's going to be tough. So if you think that you just watch the news and it seems like nothing's going on, it doesn't mean it's the case. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think anything else. You got more questions? I feel like I could just keep talking on, but I gotta move here.
Yeah, no, same. I gotta get rolling, but no, I'm good. I really appreciate you doing this, and I can pass this along, as soon as you're done, or like as soon as we're done. Yeah, man, it was good to reconnect. I feel like I rarely talk to anybody from from high school.
For sure.
You know what I mean? It's just been, it's cool to talk with somebody from home that isn't
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, and moving forward, if you have any, we could just touch base from time to time and just kind of talk about what's going on, or, whatever you want to do. So just keep in touch, and we could keep doing something. But I appreciate your time today.
Yes,
Great
sir,
talking
man.
with you. Great
Appreciate you.
catching up. All right, you have a wonderful
All right,
one.
bye,
Thank you.
man.
Bye-bye.
You too.